Okay, this is a nice paper, but I'm having a crash of my system repeatedly, so hopefully this will not be destroyed. Farmers' perspective on carbon markets incentivizing agricultural soil carbon sequestration. There have been some programs under the UN on climate mitigation through additional soil carbon sequestration. People can do it typically by planting trees or by doing things like agroforestry, where you mix trees with agriculture, and that is shown to enhance soil carbon. So you have to show that you have done something that you wouldn't do normally, so you are sequestering additional carbon into the soil. We'll see at the end that this is always tricky to prove additionality to get funded. For doing that is always tricky. So I'll just read briefly a few nice things, because this is how you would want to do it. Engage farmers in this carbon market for soil carbon sequestration, and hear what their concerns and experiences are and what needs to be tweaked in the way it's formulated as you go in. Climate change mitigation efforts to achieve net zero emissions require not only decreasing current greenhouse gas emissions, but also the deployment of negative emissions technologies. This is something still kind of imaginary, I would say. Soil organic carbon sequestration in agricultural land is one such negative emission technology. It keeps saying negative emissions technology. Currently being incentivized predominantly through voluntary carbon offset markets. Through semi-structured interviews, we assess both conventional and organic farmer perspectives on soil carbon offset programs that have been created in the United States since 2017. Offset is where somebody emits and then they pay you to sequester their emission by using one of these methods. The perspectives of farmers both participating and not participating in agricultural soil carbon markets were similar and consistent. Farmers in both groups expressed concerns about the convoluted, burdensome, and unpredictable nature of receiving offset credits, and emphasized that they were implementing practices for their own business interests and sustainability concerns, not the financial incentive of the generation of carbon credits. So they were aware of the sustainability issues, importance of soil carbon for enhancing their own crop yields and profits. Based on our research, carbon offset credit payments for agricultural soil carbon sequestration are largely reaching farmers who were already implementing these beneficial practices or were already strongly interested in implementing these practices, and the payments for the offset credits are seen as gravy on top. This is an American expression suggesting that these offset markets face strong challenges of ensuring true additionality essential to effective climate mitigation. So doing more than you otherwise would. Gravy on top refers to something like turkey, where you have a meat or steak or whatever, and then you have gravy on top that adds flavor and, makes it more makes it much better, just like icing on the cake that we talk about. Okay, so here are the activities that enhance carbon sequestration in agricultural soils. This figure shows on-farm activities that can enhance soil carbon sequestration. In some circumstances, type of activities can be implemented to generate carbon credits under voluntary market carbon offset protocols. Conservation tillage, so reducing tillage limits the loss of carbon through oxidation, decomposition, and erosion. After each crop, if you till the land to clear the biomass from the previous crop, then you actually expose more of the soil surface to loss and erosion, loss of carbon and erosion of soil. Here, cover cropping. Plants absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which enters the soil through decomposing plant matter and root exudates. So you have various types of cover crops that enhance nitrogen fixation and reduce carbon loss and sequester more carbon and so on. Compost and soil amendments, additional sources of carbon increase stocks of soil organic carbon. So compost obviously is a kind of a organic fertilizer, and soil amendments are basically actively improving soil health. So semi-structured interview guide, there are a bunch of questions. I won't read all of them. We'll look at some of the answers though. Tell me a little bit about your farm and what you do. What do you think about your farming as it relates to climate change? In what ways does climate change affect you? Overall, what do you think would make carbon credit program work better for farmers? How do you think agriculture needs to adapt to address climate change? And where do you see carbon markets for soil carbon sequestration in 5 years from now? Where would you like to see the markets in 5 years? So here is the code book. This figure depicts the 2-level code book used in analyzing qualitative semi-structured interview transcripts. So you ask all these questions, you get subjective answers, and you have to get some message out of it by synthesizing them. So this is the code book. Motivations for practice adoption. Concerns with soil carbon offsets. So here you have environmental co-benefits are the motivation. Reduced greenhouse gases, reduced impact on climate. Practice benefit bottom line. So practices benefit bottom line, so there is a profit motive anyways. Payment for offsets are not a motivation. Practices increase long-term sustainability of farms, so they are aware that there is a payoff. The concerns include payments are too low, paperwork, administrative burden, lack of predictable payments, so there is uncertainty in getting paid for additional sequestration. Bias to benefit big agriculture, so if you have lots of land and you do this, then they can pull out a lot of the funds for offsetting. Markets are not fair in principle, greenwashing through offsets, so people just lie about offsetting. Additionality requirements create an unfair burden. Proving that you actually did more than you would otherwise is always tricky. So motivations for practice adoption. Across both groups of farmers, those participating in carbon markets and those not participating, the primary motivations to adopt beneficial farming practices were the same: overall economic profitability and intergenerational resilience due to maintaining soil health, healthy soils. So they were thinking about passing on the farm to their offspring and giving them a healthy soil in the longer term. As a whole, all farmers were motivated to adopt practices that sequestered carbon because of interests in long-term sustainability, crop health, and farm profitability. Farmers who were actively participating in carbon markets for soil carbon sequestration or who had attempted to utilize such carbon markets adopted practices for a number of reasons, but the ability to participate in a carbon market was not the primary reason. As one farmer said of the practice changes, encouraged by carbon markets, which he had implemented years before being approached by carbon market. That sentence is slightly off, but you understood what it means. We made all those changes to cover crops, no-till, and all the things that they want you to do. We did that just for our own profitability and survival. It's a better way to farm. So that's the farmer just saying, I would do it anyways. Our goal is that we are constantly looking at the future of our operations and how we can make sure that we are maintaining the soils and the land that we have so that they are in very high fertility rates, as well as we are building the organic matter on the farm. So as we start to continue to see and we have in our area our weather patterns change, that we can combat by with hopefully really fertile healthy soil. So they are seeing a local microclimate impact. Whether this is quantified or not, I'm not so sure. Why not take the money while it's there, said one. Another reiterated that carbon payments were a clear benefit to their operation. If I have gotten an installment today, that's something I can make a difference, that I can make a difference to my family and my business today. Obviously, sequestration is great for climate mitigation, but it is even better for the soil, said another farmer. Well, you are looking at it the wrong way. You should put your cover crop out because it was the right thing for you to do for your operation. Stack the carbon program on top of that. So, do the things you are doing and then stack the carbon market program on top. Anything that has any sort of monetary value attached to it, I think it's gonna be that works in the long run. Okay, so another one said, I think it's a sort of an added bonus. Okay, what are the concerns about soil carbon markets? Farmers from both subject pools expressed numerous concerns about and frustration with existing carbon markets. These concerns included compensation being too low and substantial burdens of framework and a lack of predictability and the black box of credit calculations. Frustration that the markets were skewed to benefit larger scale agriculture, and concerns about both greenwashing and additionality. How to make sure that people are not just lying about additional carbon, and how to even prove additionality. We present evidence for each of these concerns below. Just to read off a couple. No, that's not going to change anybody. Nobody's going to quit doing the way they have always done it. Try over something new for that. So the mental model of farmers is important to understand what incentivizes them or motivates them to actually change the fundamental ways they do things, other than profitability, as we said, and some sense of sustainability and the impact of maintaining healthy soils on crop yields and so on. Non-participating farmers felt that carbon markets were built for large conventional farmers who were not using many beneficial practices already, and they felt that carbon markets would result in little profit for them. So basically they were not participating because they didn't even trust the process, and they were concerned that large scale farmers would corner the market on offsetting. From what I have seen in carbon markets that have been established, cap and trade has not paid enough to fund those, so that a smaller scale would get enough to even pay for the time they have to spend applying. So if you make the process of application and proving additionality and so on very complicated and burdensome, and the payoff is very small, they might just say not worth my time. Okay, finally, these concerns about additionality are not unique. Recent analysis of soil carbon farming, the Australian Carbon Farming Initiative's performance, have found significant concerns for ensuring additionality under a voluntary carbon offset protocol in that system as well. Wow, this sentence is long, but let's make sure it makes sense. These concerns about additionality are not unique, that's clear. Recent analysis of soil carbon farming, the Australian Carbon Farming Initiative's performance, some analysis was done of the similar approach. They have found significant concerns for ensuring additionality under a voluntary carbon offset protocol in that system as well. So Australians also had trouble quantifying additionality and so on. So the system didn't crash this time, but some drilling started outside my window and destroyed the last minute of the podcast. So let me start this again. We were talking about the Australians analyzing their soil carbon offset initiative, and they again found that additionality is tricky in the voluntary carbon offset protocol. Is there a better way to do it? Again, it comes down to cost benefit analysis of some sort, because if you think about carbon sequestration and you think about how much it costs. That's one factor. If the price drops enough for a ton of carbon to be sequestered, then it will become very viable economically. Right now, I think it costs somewhere around maybe few $100 per ton, and they are not scalable. And there is also the life cycle analysis needed, where you are not using up more energy to sequester carbon than the carbon you are removing, unless all the energy is renewable and it's the net zero process in some way. So keeping all that in mind, as the voluntary market for agricultural soil carbon offsets expand, as markets expand or market expands, it is increasingly important to ensure that market programs for agricultural soil carbon sequestration are effective at sequestering additional carbon and appealing enough to incentivize farmers to adopt soil carbon sequestration practices. The co-benefits have to somehow get value as well. If you sequester carbon, and that starts a virtuous cycle of soil moisture persistence, drought resilience, crop yields, nutrient retention, and so on, then the farmer's profitability goes up, as we already saw. So how do you tell farmers that this additionality constraint is going to just give you more money and help you also with all these other co-benefits? So as you saw here with the participants and non-participants, the biggest burden seems to be that proving additionality is tricky. So can you just pay them without having to prove additionality, but just use holistic methods like low tillage, no tillage, or agroforestry and so on, and do it. I don't know how often it is done here, but if you do it every year and just measure soil carbon, and if it's growing, then you just assume that there is additionality. So there must be a way to simplify the additionality burden on farmers to get them engaged more, because the overall benefit of having farmers worry about soil carbon sequestration can benefit everybody. Right? So I'm not an expert on the economics of these things, but I'm sure as we keep on pushing towards global warming targets and reducing emissions and mitigating our impacts, this will begin to expand, and the kinks will be worked out somehow, and farmers will be made participate voluntarily, or with these incentives, or with regulations and so on. So let's leave this here, and sorry for the choppy recording, but hopefully it's okay now. Okay.